Welcome to this podcast from Lambeth Palace Library, the National Library and Archive of the Church of England. The library was founded in 1610 by Richard Bancroft, who bequeathed over 6,000 printed books and manuscripts for the use of his successors as Archbishop of Canterbury. Since then it has become the historic library of the National and International Church of England, and has amassed diverse collections of manuscripts, archives and printed books. It has also absorbed other major library collections, such as the Historic Library of Syon College. The library welcomes the public to its exhibitions, and its collections attract many researchers, including church historians, social historians, and people researching architectural history. In 2020, the library moved from its former home in the grand halls and medieval towers of Lambeth Palace to a modern purpose-built library erected just a stone's throw away at the end of the palace garden. 2 years on from the move, researcher and historian Andrew Foster talks to staff about the new building. The first voice you will hear is Amy Richardson. Amy joined the team as engagement officer shortly after the move. She is often the first person to greet visitors when they come through the door. She tells Andrew about some of the benefits the new building has brought and how readers have reacted to the change.
People can just walk in off the street, and that's really good because, as far as I'm concerned, there's no point in protecting all this if nobody can see it and use it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise it's just a bunch of stuff stuck in a store. And what makes a collection come alive is the interaction between different objects, but also between the public and those things, whether they're using them for research or we're using them for an exhibition to tell a story. It also means that the exhibitions can be accessed more easily. Before, I understand it had to be on particular days, whereas now we're open every weekday between 9:30 and 5. Another benefit is just the facilities we can offer, particularly to readers. The reading room is beautiful, it's very peaceful and calm. In fact, I think the whole library is, despite being on a busy road, it's very much a bit of an oasis. So it's great to be able to walk readers into the facilities, and particularly if they've been at the old library, they normally go, oh wow, this is a bit of a difference.
Yes, although I have teased a number of people that it's very strange. I now feel more I'm walking into an archive office, whereas when I saw the library books before, in sense that sense of a library is no longer quite as clear cut. I keep encouraging to say there ought to be some bookshelves out in the foyer as well.
Yes, it's often people who are looking for a public library get a bit confused, like, where are the books?
Yeah.
I have to explain that we don't have open stacks because the items we care for need to be kept in controlled conditions, which, while you don't get the joy of browsing the shelves and seeing them, is better for the collection. It makes our librarians a bit happier.
Yes.
I'm happier here. I'm happier for the collections. The palace was lovely, but the back wall of our office was 1175 or something. It was built, yeah? The back wall was stone, and every time it rained in that building, you walked around looking for leaks, and then you spend ages afterwards just listening for drips, you know?
Printed books librarian Hugh Cahill.
Kept material weren't the best in terms of environment for books, temperature and humidity. I mean, for example, Morton's Tower, where we had material, 15th century tower, built on a marsh, damp at the top. If anything, fire had no fire suppression system. If fire had taken hold, everything would have been lost. There was no way you would get material out there.
I miss the Great Hall and I miss the library.
It looked great, and I loved it, particularly after the refurbishment. But as a librarian, it made me anxious. I've been here since 2011, and we've moved, a couple of years ago now. But I could see the deterioration of some of the bindings, even in that short period of time. And we had several mould outbreaks in the Grey Hall.
Gosh.
And we did get lots of mould. And the bindings, some of which were repaired after the war, and I suppose the materials weren't that great with austerity, etc., and were beginning to fail. And you could see that they were failing. So it really wasn't a place for early printed books. But you're right. There are certain things that are lost, but they're lost so that we don't lose the collections.
No, yes, it's a good warning. I mean, you see these wonderful pictures. What you're warning me is that behind the scenes could be mould, insects.
It depends on the building itself, but no librarian I have talked to from an historic building has ever said everything's lovely with their building and their collections. Every historic building has its issues.
We were finding melted plugs in Morton's Tower when things were left on overnight. That something would need to have been done about that. And indeed, I mean, the palace is now being rewired fairly comprehensively.
Giles Mandelbrote, Head Librarian and Archivist at Lambeth Palace Library.
And I think it's important to understand that really this new building is the first opportunity that the library has had to develop a public profile that's fully rounded. In the old palace buildings, there were always great problems about bringing the public in, partly because simply of the configuration of the historic buildings of the palace, but also there was increasingly a security concern about bringing the general public into a place that was both the home and the office of the Archbishop, his family home, a place where a lot of staff were working on confidential material and so on. So it can't really be exaggerated that the new building offers a sea change really in terms of public access, because we now have a door on the street that the public can just walk through, and anybody passing can come in, can find out more about our collections and our history and the history of the site as well, and the history of the Church of England and what it represents. People can come in and see exhibitions, they can look at our collections on the touch tables in the entrance hall, they can look things up and come and use the reading room. So that's a really big change for us. And alongside that comes opportunities with that kind of greater profile to offer more to people in terms of training, in terms of volunteering and so on.
Since moving to the new building, the library offers frequent tours, giving people a chance to see both the collections and some of the work that goes on behind the scenes. The conservation studio has proved one of the main attractions.
It's everyone's favourite place in the building.
That's interesting.
When you take people on tours, that's the hardest place to get them out of.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
I think because there's something so fascinating about being in that building and seeing the work they do.
Senior conservator Lara Artemis tells Andrew more about the fascination of the new building for the public and the huge benefits of the new conservation studio.
Post-pandemic, everybody wants to come and visit our fabulous space.
Absolutely.
We have been quite a big chunk of the tour, and that's meant that we really do spend a large proportion of our time talking to the public about the library, the new studio, which is fabulous, and the kind of projects that are coming up in terms of conservation and collection care.
You are one of the people who benefited most in one way of getting the new building. In another way, though, I can imagine it's thrown a headache, because in the process of moving, possibly a lot more conservation needs were identified as things that are, all the creepy crawlies and all the problems of the old library coming across, and the archives even coming across.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting because fundamentally the new library was built to manage the protection of the collections. That is predominantly what it's as a single entity, both in combining the Church of England Record Centre collections with Lambeth Palace Library. It's creating this one single entity to protect in this and encapsulate this collection and enable reader access off the back of that. But protection is about physical protection, security as part of that, environmental protection and chemical protection, which is, they were really quite heavily suffering where they were before they got here. And there's something in conservation called the 10 agents of deterioration, and we were not hitting any of those targets. And the 10 agents are things like fire, flood, pests, all the things you've just mentioned. We weren't hitting anywhere near the targets you would want to say, I can manage the risk to this. So this building has come at a great time to be able to manage that to a certain level of reader requirement, the kind of engagement people want to have with the collections. For us, it's been an eye-opener because over the past 5 years, the team have focused, and some of them came in on contracts to manage the protection programme. It's a migration process. So cleaning the collections, condition assessing, placing them into boxes. We made over 40,000 boxes in the process to enable things to be moved. But whilst we did that, as you would when you're packing up your house to move, we were able to see the things we needed to bring or didn't need to bring, and really got a sense of what we might need to do in terms of conservation in the future. So in one way it's a bit of a headache, but at the same time now we know we have a much better idea of what we might need to be doing in terms of conservation intervention in the future.
Yeah.
The architects were brilliant, by the way. They really engaged with the needs of what we needed to have as a working conservation collections care studio. We asked for 3 things. Predominantly it was about access, not have to walk up a 500-year-old stone spiral staircase with a large map or plan to conserve. And so being able to have a space that's very close to the loading bay was very, very helpful, and having something that we call our quarantine set up for acquisition, so things coming in from people's sheds, we can deal with it as a triage process. So where we sit is a really clever position for collections coming in and going out. The other part of it is space. Having larger space. Everybody wants space, as you can imagine, but we do need areas where we can lay large maps and plans out, be able to work on books at the same time, work on prints and drawings. You've seen the breadth of the materiality of the collection, being able to lay things out and dry things out. It was getting very, very complicated where we were in the old Morton's Tower. Lovely studio, but was just too small and not able to cope with that. And then part of that was also being able to divide functionalities within that space. So we have a laboratory for wet work and chemical work. We have a workshop for dirty, paring leather, etc. All the things that you might do with that. And then the last thing is light. Although we had good light over at Morton's Tower, the light here is absolutely brilliant because we get light from all different directions for all different light eye abilities to manage light. So between LED lighting and natural lighting coming in through those large windows, I think you saw when you came into the studio, and looking across the pond, even the reflection helps you to see raking across paper. So it's a really nice way to be able to work in an environment that actually suits all the needs of everybody that might want to work there. And the other part of it is being able to make it as inclusive as possible. So the space actually allows anybody to be able to work in that space who have any physical needs.
But it's not just the historic collections from Lambeth Palace Library that have benefited from the improved environment and conservation facilities in the new building.
The library absorbed the former Church of England Record Centre, which was based in Bermondsey. It had its own premises in an old brewery warehouse. And so both the collections, which are very substantial, and the staff of the record office were merged into the library. So the library staff is now between 30 and 40.
Staff from the former record office tell Andrew about some of the benefits of the move to the new building.
I love it when it rains because I don't feel the need to rush out into the storage area to listen for that very distinctive ping as the water drops from a high roof onto the metal racking. Fundamentally the storage, the environment, the protection for the records is so much better.
Yes, and when talking with Lara, I was struck by one of the points about the move would have been the kind of opportunity for the first time for a very long time to actually take a risk assessment about some of the state of the documents and sort of be earmarking what for her will be a huge job of conservation and problems, won't it, along the line of discovery of things, as you say, which were kept in their old conditions where problems have arisen.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right, because everything had to be touched to get it to move. We are much more aware of the condition of the collection and also the content, because there were things that I did not know we had and not all of it listed. So stock take was certainly very useful. It's useful for us as for the readers to have the material in one place, and again to be able to showcase the material to people coming off the street.
Archivist Krzys Adamiec was also among the team who moved to the new library building from the Church of England Record Office in Bermondsey.
I always like to compare those two collections, the old Lambeth Palace Library and then the Bermondsey collection, as two batteries. When you get them together and make them work together, then you generate much more power and light, in a way.
The way the new building relates to the environment is perhaps one of its most striking features.
First time in the history of both collections, or the merged collections, they are housed under the roof of a building that provides proper environmental controls, with this very nice thing and a good thing that it's a so-called passive control, so we don't really use that much energy in order to achieve our goals.
For us, we have this fabulous building, and we're just looking at how it's performing and looking after the collections, and that includes another element of sustainability, how we manage that with the environment that it's sitting in.
The back of the library overlooks an area of the palace gardens which is reserved for wildlife, and visitors entering reception find themselves before a huge glass window with a view over a sparkling pond and verdant wilderness beyond, where fox families often come to bask in the sun. However, as we have heard, it is the front aspect of the building with its entrance to the street that really offers new opportunities to welcome the public to the library and engage them with the collections. Hugh sums up some of the key benefits the new library building has brought, particularly for reader access.
In terms of staff, collections and readers, it's much better. But also it gives us the opportunity, really, not for the first time, because we've often had exhibitions in the past, but they were always difficult to hold because the security of the building. Now we have a front door on the street, which somebody who's not using the reading room, who just wants to come in and look at our displays, can just wander around the mezzanine floor looking at the cases. And when the low light room, the sort of proper exhibition space is open, hopefully early next year, they'll be able to see even more substantial, some of the treasures of our collections as well.
Well, that brings us almost to the end of this podcast, but to conclude this journey from the old to the new library, we'd like to leave you with the voice of someone who has used the collections here for many years and has experienced the move to the new building from a different perspective. Here is Andrew Foster.
It's in the 1970s that I first started coming to Lambeth Palace Library. The old library, of course, was up in Juxon's Hall, and that looked wonderful. It's always been a very imposing hall to be in, and one of the great pleasures of coming was to sort of be wandering around the shelves and sort of finding familiar texts that you don't rarely see on open shelves. We would enter through a small door in the side of the wall and go through into a little courtyard, and then through an ante-room through into another courtyard, and then eventually arrive at the archives. And I remember visiting very nervously as the first time and standing at that gate and pressing the bell and then waiting quite a while because the archivist had to come from inside from quite a distance to come to open the gate. And that's a totally different experience from here, where you can come in off the main road and into a large foyer, and a welcoming foyer at that, and feel quickly at ease. I was blown over by the new search room with its wonderful view out onto the garden as well. It's very clean, very efficient, very light, and the staff are, as ever, very welcoming. So it was a very good experience on arriving first, and of course the experience of seeing round the whole facility, it got better and better, because here we are sitting in the Abbot room, which is a lovely seminar room with a view out of the window onto the garden, and all mod cons in terms of the air conditioning, all the visual aids and all the rest of it. And upstairs there's a marvellous Bancroft room, which is a superb lecture space on the roof almost, and so with beautiful views all around London.